Got it. Hi, everyone. My name is Francesca Costa. I'm with the New Jersey, spotlighted. Hi, everyone. My name is Francesca Costa. I'm with the New Jersey section of the Palisades Interstate Park. And today we're going to be talking about recovering from the big ones, or we're going to be looking at historic storms in the park, how we recover, and also just a look into the future and how we're preparing for the next ones. So to start off, if you've never been to our park, it starts right at the New York border and then goes all the way down to Fort Lee, New Jersey. In our park, we have things like the giant stairs, which are pictured here, which are these massive rock scrambles towards the north of the park. All throughout, we have these sheer cliff faces and also river trails. So like riverside trails, just like this one. And right around here, we have the George Washington Bridge and some ice on the river. So if you look closely, you can see it sort of has always been a dangerous park, not for the faint of heart. Here's a rock slide from the last 15 years, I believe, in 2012, was it? Yeah, 2012. So this is an active park that's, has always known dangerous conditions. That's one of the reasons why we ask folks after big storms, even after a few weeks, to if we ask you not to be in a certain place in the park, this is probably why. There's tons of recovering from these storms that we need to do, taking down trees or fixing trails that eroded. So we're going to be talking first about storms in more living memory. There are a lot of storms that are in a lot of living memory, but these are the ones in the last 30 or so years. So this one's the perfect storm. And this happened in 1991. It was actually a combination between a hurricane to the south and a nor'easter coming in from the north. And these conditions actually created horrific weather. A lot of people are familiar with the book and the movie that came out after. People that I've asked do remember this storm. I wasn't there for it, but in our park, we don't really have an accurate count of the destruction, but it seems like the New Jersey section fared a lot better than a little bit north, which seems to agree with statements that along the Jersey shore, it was a lot more disastrous than in our area, right on the river. And then a little bit to the north of us also got a lot of damage. Down by the CONNIE house, though, we got about a foot of water in the house. This is down by the Alpine Boat Basin and our historic house from the 1760s. And when you build a house this close to the river, you're going to expect it to weather a few of these major storms. And when Eric, who is with me, when he started working, this was like the largest storm in recent memory, that they got a foot of water in the house. That was a very unprecedented event. You can see, this is actually when it's receded a little and a cameraman can come down. Here's it from another angle, and you can see these benches actually were pushed up on the tide. They weren't there originally. These are picnic tables from elsewhere. Now we get to Hurricane Irene, and we don't have any photos of this in the park, but it was a similar style of destruction as this, where it was around a foot of water, a little bit of flooding. And this was a storm that actually came up and was still a Category 1 and just turning into a tropical storm when it was hitting us. So a lot of people remember downed trees and flooding from that event, but we're not directly on the ocean, so we fared better than a lot of other places during it. Hurricane Sandy, though, that was, it's only in 2012, but we like to call it the storm of the century, right? That was a massive, massive storm that changed a lot of how boating works. Anyone who had a boat during that event probably lost their boat at the same time. In our park, this was some of the damage that we had to clean up. This is all just flotsam that came in. This is the CONNIE house before that event. And this is the CONNIE house after that event. We got over 4 feet of water inside of the house. And what we believe happened was the water actually came in okay, came in through this tidal event and then collapsed the wall outwards. So what we're seeing here is actually the wall buckling from within instead of, usually you think of it the other way around where the tide is splashing and, sort of breaking these structures from outside. But yeah, and we're very, very, very lucky that the house was built as it was very strongly. So this house remains standing, even though it lost an entire wall. Elsewhere in the park, this is what was strewn across all of the trails. It was a major issue. And, we focus a lot on the major destruction of our boat basins and all of that, but this was also a significant amount of cleanup, and that all had to be done. Here's right down by Ross Dock, and in this area, you can see all of this mud caked on surfaces. And, this mud, still has to be cleaned up in certain areas. Even at Fort Wadsworth on Long Island, they still have Hurricane Sandy mud on certain surfaces. They just don't have the funding to clean it. So yeah, this storm really did mark, the 21st century for us in a lot of ways. This is some of the repair work being done on the CONNIE house. It's really great that a lot of the maintenance folks, they love this house. And the carpenter who works for our park, he put in a lot of effort, and he still does. He fixes our windows when we need it, and he actually in a later storm will help us as well. This is a good photo. It's jarring, but we also found boats inside of trees. This was a major event. And if anyone knows anyone with a boat, like I said, they've either lost the boat or found it somewhere completely inland. I have a friend who their boat was found in a nearby town that didn't have any water nearby. So, and this is some of the debris. It looks like flotsam, but a lot of it was once our boat basin, and some of the floating dock parts of that, which completely had to be repaired. We actually had to change how we operated that marina because of this. Here's a tasty photo. If you think a public bathroom is gross, you haven't seen it with mud all over after a major storm event like this. And you can just see how far up the wall that water got. And it's farthest flooding event. Just to mention, Sandy in a lot of ways, was called the perfect storm because of this. It was a very high tide at the same time as the storm coming in, which caused a lot of damage, especially along the Palisades, which is riverfront property. So you think it's not ocean, so what kind of damage could possibly happen? But the river likes to remind us who's boss. So everyone here probably remembers Hurricane Ida. It happened a few years ago. Just to remind everyone, this storm made landfall as a Category 3 in Louisiana, which is around 1,200 miles away from us. And by the time it got to us, it was like just the remnants of a storm. It wasn't even really that extreme at that point. But we have almost the same number of deaths in New Jersey as we did in Louisiana. And this is after this storm went through over 1,200 miles of coast of, heartland America, not even coastline. Part of that is because although Louisiana got this major, massive event, we just didn't know how to be prepared for something like this. It wasn't a storm event coming from the ocean. Oftentimes in the park, we tell people that Hurricane Sandy hit us from the ocean and from our river, but Hurricane Ida really hit us just from the top of the cliffs. We got so much rain that nothing could handle it, which is something that you really can't prepare people for if they've never gone through a flash flood like that. So instead of flotsam from the river, we're seeing rocks and rubble and erosion and mud coming from our cliffs. And so this was a huge major event. And if you think it's easy to clean up, everything left over from the ocean, it's even harder to clean up things, just rocks, these huge, huge boulders and rocks coming from the top of the cliffs. Major events like the Dykeman Road. What happened was there was a major flash flood. So where does water go? It tries to find the easiest way down. So what it did was it actually seeped underneath this road and peeled off layers of asphalt and left them in a pile on the bottom. Basically, this storm was really damaging when you look at it as an erosion event, because now, we're nowhere near ready to repair this road. And, it's the most disastrous event hitting this road that it's ever been. This road's been in use to some degree since 1870. I don't think the original people who built it would ever assume an event like this would hit it. We had a lot of rubble. It took us a long time to repair after Hurricane Ida. People always ask us, oh, when are your roads going to be repaired? When are the rocks going to go away? And we wish we had answers, but we are starting to fix things. And at the end of the program, I'll get into what we're doing and looking forward to in the future. But so when we ask you to stay off a certain section of road or a certain trail, even if you think, oh, well, the hurricane was months ago, there might be reasons behind it that, have to do with erosion or other sorts of dangers. Like this is an active roadway, or it was. There is layers of asphalt underneath this road, and you can see what erosion did. So all of this dirt's coming from somewhere, and it's up above, and it's washing down, and then eroding more rocks and rubble further down from that. So those are the sort of issues that we face in the park, but we repaired most of our roads. We're still finding ways to fund our Dykeman Street Road. That is the major project now, and that might remain closed for some time. But we've been able to open up large sections of our trail due to our trail crew, and our maintenance department has removed a large portion of these rocks from our picnic areas. Our CONNIE house, basically, since the water didn't come from the river, the CONNIE house didn't get flooded in the same way that it would during a major flooding event. Instead, the water came right from the cliffs. So right behind the house, there was a large mass of water that seeped in through the back. So we had to mop, we had to get, it was like 2 inches of mud in the house in some parts. It was, crazy. And then once we were mopping, I accidentally fell through the floor a little bit. You hate to see it. And we realized that with sort of these events, the floorboards underneath the house were slowly rotting. And this is a natural process, replacing these floorboards. Our carpenter in the park did a wonderful job figuring out how to drain. There's like a whole new drainage system underneath that part of the house now, and these beautiful new floorboards. So Hurricane Ida left us not without a scratch, but we were able to repair after it. So now today, we are dealing with not necessarily major storms, but we are starting to notice some things that are worrisome, like this, which if it loads, is a video. Let's postpone that. Oop. If it doesn't play, that's okay. I have the photos. But this is after a light, basically a little bit of heavy rain. Yeah. And there you can see the George Washington Bridge. Why go to a rainforest when you can just go to our park on a mildly rainy day, right? And so this is over 100 feet of a beautiful waterfall. The only problem is this isn't an active stream. If anything, it might be like a little trickle of water that you might see, but this isn't on any map. This isn't, a known brook. This isn't some sort of like you hear about the different kills in the area. This is just flash flooding, which is worrisome, especially onto an active roadway like this, and also due to erosion. When you're thinking about, the structural soundness of your park, you don't want to worry about all of these things that aren't on maps that are causing these massive boulders that you can see to maybe erode. So these are some concerns that we've been seeing. Even if it's just a little bit of storm off our coast, we are seeing flooding events that are sort of creeping up on the house. During high tides, we're seeing more water. During light rains, we're seeing more water, but it's not because of the rain, it's because this is actually coming from the river itself. It's not, yeah. And we're seeing this more and more commonly. So much so now that, when my mom, she just got lost in the park somewhere and called me and said, I'm in some flooded parking lot, where am I? But I didn't know which parking lot that was. And I would like to remind people that it's not just flooding in the parking lots, it's flooding on our trails. It's flooding all along the river. So this isn't necessarily something that you can probably raise a parking lot, but you can't engineer away a problem like this for all along these trails. Here we have a kiosk that no one can read due to this flooding. Right next door is the boat basin, and the flooded parking lot right next to that. But we're also seeing it on sunny days. So during this other photo, you can say like, oh, it might have been during a storm. There must have been some precipitation causing this. We're also seeing it during sunny days. And more commonly. And this is called blue sky flooding. It's a known phenomenon. It's becoming more common along all coastal parks, any sort of development along any sort of coastline in the country. I believe NASA's looking into it a lot because they have satellites and they can actually map different areas during different times of the seasons and the year for tides. Here's another section, and you can see no one can really use those picnic tables when even during a blue sky day, we're getting flooding in the park, and that's actually an active roadway in between where those rocks are. We are seeing NASA, through the use of their wonderful satellites, are actually measuring sea height variation. This chart is in millimeters. And this is all around the world. This is not just in New Jersey or America. All around the world, we're seeing that slowly these conditions are getting worse along the coast. And here's here's a different chart. This is from sealevelrise.org. And this actually measures in local locations. So local to New Jersey, the sea level around Atlantic City has risen by 12 inches since 1950. The speed of rise has accelerated over the last 10 years and is now rising by over 1 inch every 5 years. Scientists know this because the sea level is measured every 6 minutes. And I was surprised by that. I think, you know, every 6 minutes they're measuring this and they're still coming to this conclusion. So, you know, using satellites, floating buoys, and tidal gauges. So, you know, this is something that's we're going to have to address. And towards the end of the program, I'll explain how we're addressing it. Don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. And although New Jersey, you know, we're seeing more and more of these frequent dramatic weather storms, we have never been a stranger to such storms. You know, we've always had some extreme weather, no tornadoes like you see out in the Midwest, but, you know, we have had our fair share of storms and large events. Here we have in the park, these are, I don't know if it's WPA or CCC. So these are some lads from probably New York who are actually taking on the hard work of building structures and clearing roads and doing all sorts of things within the park during the 1930s. I love that equipment they have. Here's a great photo. This is from a little bit later, but you can see how the park looks lovely in the snow. And we used to have a ski place up by State Line. And, you know, we have our old ski trails. This guy's snowshoeing. I think he's a park policeman, all within the view of the bridge. Here is actually one of the most interesting projects. This was WPA, right?
Actually, CWA.
CWA. You got to mix the two. So this is a CWA project during the coldest winter, still on record for the New York, New Jersey area. And here you can see them excavating out what will become the Alpine Bathing Beach, Alpine Bathing Basin, Alpine Bathing Pavilion. And here it is completed. They completed it in record time, very quickly. They probably tried to work to keep themselves warm. And Eric brought to my attention the guy on the roof sweeping the snow off of it. And you can see.
They had like 4 or 5 blizzards in a month or so.
Oh, geez.
That 1934.
1934, they had 4 or 5 major blizzards during the construction of this. So they worked for their peanuts. Here we also have a beautiful photo of these cars next to some downed trees. Every sort of storm makes trees fall in the park. We aren't a stranger to that. Here's a flooding event from earlier on in the 30s and 40s. You can see how it was so notable that they set up this old style camera to take this photo, which I think is interesting. You know, it's easy for me to just snap a photo of my job on the phone, but this was notable. This is actually the aftermath of a hurricane in 1944. You know, familiar, but not as destructive as any of the events in living memory. So here is actually, this is one of the most destructive hurricanes on record. Over 600 people passed away in this event. I think it hit our coast. Meteorologists argue whether it was, like, which category it was, but some people think it was a category 4 when it hit Long Island, which is insane. And also, it's important to note that folks back then didn't have necessarily the same technologies as us, so they might not even know how big of a storm it was. They wouldn't know what to do in certain events. The death estimate is probably an estimate as well. Here is what it looked like as it went up the coast. And here's an annual report of the park. In the year 1938, the hurricane of September 21st caused considerable damage throughout the park, both in trees blown down and as the result of small rock slides due to excessive wash. So the same thing that we dealt with during Hurricane Ida, these mudslides and these massive rocks coming down. The damage was repaired as quickly as possible with the very limited park maintenance crew. So you can see how we are stretched thin, especially during these storm events and in the aftermath. We make do with what we have. And even back in 1938, they didn't have many people who could fix it, but apparently they did fix it. Here is a photograph from 1938. We're assuming it's either in the aftermath of this hurricane or in the aftermath of some other storm. It's difficult to tell, but again, it's noteworthy that they decided to take a photo of this because they were using older styles of technology and older styles of cameras. So this is the Great Windstorm of 1950. It's sometimes called the storm of the century. It was a major event, and it hit all the way from Ohio all the way here. It was like a massive snowstorm. It dropped over 30 inches of snow in some locations. Here's just a photo I found online. She doesn't look very happy cleaning out her car. Here's another one. Apparently it caused considerable damage to bungalows down the shore, and it might have actually caused economic shifts in who was living down there. So like Hurricane Sandy, I said everyone with a boat basically lost it. A lot of people with these bungalows basically lost them, or decided to move or decided to sell their their second little cottage. And here's what our park wrote in the 1950 annual report. The storm of November 25th, 1950 created more havoc in the park than any previous storm since the park was established. As a result of the storm, 12 miles of the shore road were heavily damaged. The Alpine Boat Basin was wrecked and approximately 350 feet of boardwalk at the Englewood Basin torn out. The docks along the waterfront sustained heavy damage. The racks and foundations at the Englewood Ferry Terminal and the pavilions at the Englewood Bloomers area were considerably weakened. Between 6,000 and 7,000 trees were blown down, which is a lot. And many of the park buildings sustained damage to their roofs, and in some cases, smaller buildings were completely demolished. While it may take several years to overcome all the effects of this storm, the maintenance department did an excellent job in getting the park reopened at the beginning of the summer season in 1951. A contractor is still working on the cleanup of the downed timber in the park area on top of the Palisades. So here they're going from completely wrecked and not sugarcoating the fact that there are areas that are wrecked to reopening in the summer season, which is very good for them. You can see how devastating this storm was. Especially going back. I don't think we have any photos of this event specifically, but it did cause havoc. So now we slide into 1955 with Hurricanes Connie and Diane. So Hurricane Connie happened on August 13th, 1955. This is a photo of Connecticut and some of the shoreline along Connecticut. It basically swept along the coast, causing a lot of damage. You can see that that's an entire lamppost that's just bent over underneath what I believe is part of a bridge or a dock. And I love the old style uniforms folks are wearing in these photos too. But you can see the absolute destruction that this would have caused all along these shorelines. Diane happened a few days later on August 17th. So just a few days right after the first event, this is happening. And it's massive flooding in the same areas. More bungalows are being washed away. This is actually a photo within our park of these boats that were damaged and sinking. This is actually right across from Inwood, so right across from Manhattan. So this is like the Englewood area. This is a very dramatic photo that I love of the storm water. splashing against our shores. And you know, this is something that we have to deal with. I love this photo. Anyone want to go on a swing ride? Very dramatic. And you know, it must have been a very brave cameraman. That's all I can say. And here's what the annual report had to say. The summer of 1955 was one of the hottest and driest 6-week periods on record. The season was brought to a crashing end by hurricanes Connie and Diane, which occurred on August 13th and 17th, respectively. Bathing facilities were in great demand as a result of the hot and dry summer. There being no such facilities in the New Jersey section because of the pollution in the Hudson River, visitors arriving at the park, especially on Sundays and holidays, were directed to the new facilities in the New York section. So this brings up both, it has a few things to bring up. So the summer of 1955 was one of the hottest and driest in known memory. So that's something to note. You know, obviously these storms ruined our coastline. And also, no one can swim in the Hudson River due to the pollution in the river, which was a problem all throughout, and we'll talk more about it very soon. You can't see all of this, but this is the New Jersey State Climatologist Report. In 2010, you can see the rankings for summer average temperatures. 1955 ranks number 7, and only a few of these, six of these years have occurred since 1999, which I thought was notable. So even though in our records, like 1955 was an incredibly hot and dry summer, but look at how many hot and dry summers we've had since then in our living memory. And so I was curious when I saw this, where we rank right now. And in 2022, 2010 still hasn't beaten us, but we have 1955 isn't even on this list anymore. One thing to note, there is a difference in measurements, and I think that's because more data from some sort of weather facility must have gotten digitized, and I actually dropped down the average, but still we're seeing more hot and dry summers than not, unfortunately. But so Hurricane Donna is in 1960. Here's someone lost a boat on the trail somewhere. Here's, I believe this is the same boat, and it's right next to the George Washington Bridge. You know, it's sort of jarring. And I love these photos. This is actually from Vineland, New Jersey, or Vineland, New Jersey. But I love these older folks scratching their heads and just looking around at their destroyed houses or cars. And so the annual report says, Hurricane Donna blew down hundreds of trees, and in addition did considerable damages to buildings, power lines, and roads. It was necessary to request $52,000 from the states of New Jersey and New York for cleanup repairs. The park was on the outskirts of the storm, and fortunately, the period of strongest winds did not occur at high tide. So we actually made out okay during this event, but the mention of funding actually got me curious to see how we can compare these different events. What I've found, at least in park events, we are actually spending more and more dollars on repairs. And this is even when I converted it to today's money. You know, you think in 1933, I believe they spent around $5,000 to $9,000 on storm ravages, which is absolutely nothing today. But even if you compare it, you know, if you convert it to today's currency, that's still basically nothing for a major, major storm. In 1945, you see hurricane damage. The Great Windstorm of 1950, which we just talked about. So that was the one that wrecked everything and was the most damage the park had ever seen. They actually kept it cheap. I believe that there was, one of the contractors was working for free. So a lot of those like 6,000 or 7,000 trees that fell down actually got removed relatively cheaply. Hurricanes Donna and Connie, this is where you start to see this spike. And to be fair, those were two events at the same time, but we're starting to see this price rack up. In 1984, it's still going up. This wasn't even notable enough that I could find any photos of it. It was barely mentioned in the annual report. It was just sort of an offhanded comment like, oh, we needed 1984 damaged a lot of the park. We spent this money to fix it. And then the perfect storm, we couldn't get an exact estimate, but it mostly missed us, so we got lucky. But here's where we're starting to see the major impacts of our world. Hurricane Sandy cost us about $1 million at the time, which would be 1.3 million today. And then Hurricane Ida is costing us a lot more. We're going to continue to see these events as well. So some of the reasons why we're seeing, it's not all doom and gloom. There are things that we can do. We are seeing overdevelopment along shorelines, but some of the ways that the Palisades Interstate Park has helped was, being an area that is a watershed, absorbing these stormwaters and absorbing areas that are actually developed that cannot absorb these stormwaters. Another thing that we've actually seen a positive change in is the pollution of the river. We mentioned it before that these hurricanes caused, not hurricanes, this pollution of the river caused negative consequences to any sort of bathing beaches, any sort of recreation in the river, even commercial fishing. And we have seen a positive impact due to human involvement. And so now we get to human-driven climate change, which we are seeing. A lot of people think it means just hotter, drier conditions, but it also means things like extreme, unpredictable, and destructive weather patterns. So seeing things like a bunch of snow in Texas or way too much snow in California. These are also symptoms of this larger issue. The positive note that I like to say this to people, a human cause means there's a human solution. So, it isn't hopeless. We were able to clean up our shores. We were able to do a whole lot of good. We can also address this other larger issue. So here's something that I found. This is just a photo of someone restoring shorelines. And this is part of sort of addressing this overdevelopment issue. Even in our park, the CCC and these other work programs, even as early as the 1930s, were replanting trees. And apparently it actually caused a very positive ecological impact. Apparently it like delayed a lot of issues for the next generation because these folks planted, I think it was somewhere between, it was like over 1 billion trees across the country in only a few years, which is insane and wonderful. So pollution, this is a very visible issue that people see clear problems with pollution right across the river from the Palisades. I found this great photo of an older factory. In 1944, they're noting that the alpine bathing area was closed for bathing during the duration because of river pollution caused by war conditions. Where in 1944, factories all up the river are cranking up and geared up for the war effort, which negatively impacts us and the river. By 1945, we're sort of facing the reality that our bathing beaches are probably closed for the foreseeable future. They're saying there seems to be no appreciable abatement in the pollution of the Hudson River since the closing of many wartime activities. For this reason, the future of bathing in the river on the Palisades section is doubtful. So we're seeing this sort of coming to the realization that there is an issue and it wasn't the war effort that was causing it. It's, pollution is here. They're continuing to pollute even after the war. Here's an annual report from 1950 talking about shad fishing in the river. The fishermen reported the worst season for many years. Fewer shad were caught, and the fishermen claim this is primarily due to river pollution. It may mean, therefore, that there will be considerable falling off of applicants in the 1951 season. And by 1955, again, as in the past 3 years, only 7 commercial shad fishermen applied. There seems to be little promise of improvement due to the serious pollution problem still existing in the river. So we're seeing the realization that this is bigger than the park. This is, an ecological disaster, basically. And speaking of ecological disasters, this is a 1977 oil spill that happened all the way up by Bear Mountain Bridge. And we're seeing in the New Jersey section, the maintenance department had to join a cleanup effort along the entire park shoreline, including the Englewood and Alpine boat basins. They carried out the park maintenance, dredged the boat basins, and did a bunch of these other jobs. But this is a photo of the event itself, and this is us miles and miles and miles downriver, our maintenance department cleaning it up and doing a great job. I don't know if you can see it, but there's the CONNIE house in the background of this shot. So that house was a witness to a lot, right? And here's a great photo. It should be on the cover of a Dove commercial, right? Here's a park maintenance worker cleaning, I believe it's a shoveler. It might be a different type of bird. And here's a close-up shot of them. And they seem cranky, but they're getting cleaned off. And so during the 70s, 60s and 70s, this green movement kicked off that directly addressed, things like industrial pollution, like through Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. It addressed more of these chemicals that are being released into our environment and how it's having a negative impact. Also things like PSAs and just reminding people not to pollute, either if that's just throwing a coffee cup on the ground or, throwing a cigarette butt on the ground, it does have an impact. Environmental education was kicking off. We were learning more and we were teaching people in new ways. Also more locally, things like this book, The Hudson River, A Natural and Unnatural History, were having a local effect on and inspiring people to care more about their local ecology. People like Clearwater were sort of addressing issues of pollutants coming from energy companies, and in our own annual reports, we're sort of seeing how we're holding either companies or other people accountable if they do pollute. Like here in 1983, a railroad corporation illegally dumped 22 truckloads of railroad ties upon park lands along the abandoned railroad bed at Iona Island. And this is a fragile marshland designated as a national natural landmark. So they actually had to completely stop operations and remove all deposited timbers from the premises. And then the best part is they also had to grade topsoil and seed the site in order to restore it to the condition which existed prior to this occurrence. So that's actually doing better. It's not just addressing the issue and removing it, it's also making it better for future generations. And so we are seeing this positive change over our annual reports. By 1992, in New Jersey, a small but extremely effective seasonal crew started recycling. And I believe they were doing it for a little bit before this, but this is just one that I found. A total of 20,000 pounds of paper, plastic, and glass and aluminum were rescued from various areas. To increase public awareness of this and participation in recycling, staff placed signs in high traffic areas and created a special barrel lid designed to accept only the designated materials. So we're starting to see this public involvement. We're starting to see this education involvement, and at least with physical stuff like recycling, we could address it, and we are seeing the river look better. So here we have, I just love this one because I love this frog, and I love the fact that he's called a biodiversity survey subject. I just love that caption. It made me laugh out loud. So recycling efforts increased in 1993, and they extended what kind of materials they were recycling. In New Jersey, more than 18 tons of glass, aluminum, plastic, and paper were collected. And they also did things, they encouraged scientific studies and surveys, just like this frog was a part of. And I think it's important. We are addressing at least the physical problems. Pollution. We are addressing, deforestation, that kind of thing by investing in these lands. The good news is that we did do something about the ozone layer as a world. A report released by the UN on January 9th found that the ozone layer is on track to recover within 4 decades, thanks to the most effective international environmental treaty ever implemented. Nearly 99% of banned ozone-depleting chemicals like CFCs have successfully been phased out. So this whole presentation has been a little bit of a doom and gloom because I'm mentioning that we're going to continue to see more and more disastrous storms. But we can see, just like when we cleaned up the river, we can do something about climate change, especially since it's a human-driven problem. There are human solutions, and as a world, we are doing at least a positive thing as far as the ozone layer is concerned. So hopefully it'll continue on this track in the future. More locally, this is this is the CONNIE house right next to the Hudson, and we are actually planning on addressing. We're not moving the house at all, but this house will be impacted by any storm that comes in the next few decades. So we are planning on putting certain things that would buffer these storm waters. We're planning on getting grant money for surveys of the house and try to figure out what we can best do to protect our own little neck of the woods. To find out more, here are some sites or sources to visit. They did a wonderful job explaining the situation to me. Like I said, it's not all doom and gloom. There are ways that you as an individual and also us as a collective can help our world. And yeah, I'm open to any questions you have, comments, concerns.